What's your horror story with bad parenting from strangers? I'll start. I was at a mall playground with the wife and 2 kids. My son was 3 years old and was running around with about 20 more kids, most of them his age. Keep in mind that kids can't be taller than 3 feet to play in this little kid playground. There was this one fat black woman, not being racist, just describing, and she was watching about 4 kids and all of them were taller than 4 feet and they were playing rough, pushing each other and whatnot. My son goes around the area they were playing at and start playing by himself, and one of the kids tries to kick my son. My wife is 5 feet 2 inches and 100 pounds, calmly walks that way with my 3-month-old daughter and tells the women she is like 5 feet 6 inches and about 250 pounds to watch her kids because they were playing a little rough, and she said okay, whatever. My wife stays there, watches just in case something happens. The older kid goes running towards my son and pushes him. My wife tells the kid, who's about 9, not to push my son. The woman flips the fuck out and starts screaming, "Don't scream at ma baby, blah blah blah." My wife tells her she should pay more attention to her kids and how they were too old to be playing around smaller kids. She tells me wife to shut the fuck up and not tell her how to raise her kids. My wife starts walking away and the woman starts getting louder. So from my seat 15 feet away I yell at her, "You do not talk to my wife that way. Your kids are misbehaving and you are doing nothing about it. Learn how to be a good parent." She shuts up and looked at me in disbelief. She didn't know I was with my wife or that I would talk to her like that in front of so many people. She then started to talk crap again and we ignored her. After 5 minutes of her shit, my wife got the security guard and got her as kicked out of the place 15 minutes after she passes doing threatening signs at my wife, but when I look at her she stopped and looked away. I was seriously raging and about to beat her ass, but I tried my best calm down and be a responsible adult. I work for WIC. This is why I love and hate my job at the same time. Mr. B came in with his small children. Told us they love going on the motorcycle. His dad just bought a sidecar, so they just strap the car seat into that. They used to just attach the baby to their bodies with a belt on the motorcycle. They feel the sidecar is much safer. Mrs. M. She's leaving Bobby, who is in jail, well, leaving him until he gets out. She's gonna live with Carl. She won't have to worry about the finances no more. They gonna get social security disability, cause he's kinda slow. That's how she said it. So she talks in front of her 14-year-old daughter about sleeping with Carl. Then says, "You won't believe what my daughter sticks in her cooch. She had my hair straightener. It was so gross. And it don't even work no more." This young 18-year-old mom gave her kids Kleenex because they like to eat them. Piker anyone. I told her she can't do that, especially not in my office. When I leave to send a fax for her lazy ass, she gives them more Kleenex. We had to have a talk about the kids choking etc. And I told her you can't do that. Beach kept doing it. We called CPS. She was pissed. Her mom came in with diabetes, I suspect uncontrolled. She acted crazy. Had her newborn in an umbrella stroller, not hooked in. Says she can't remember how much the baby eats, but he did take a 9-ounce bottle that morning, which for a newborn is madness. She then says that she sometimes has diabetic episodes. Who knows what she meant, so she liked to have bottles prepared to feed the baby in this case. What the fuck does that even mean? Are you unconscious at this time? Who is feeding the baby if baby daddy is at work? Called CPS again. Her mom poured powdered jello mix into her child's mouth in my office. She likes it, and it's fruit, right? Seriously. Her caseworker just looked at her and said, "See, I told you." I witnessed a mom having her baby taken from her by CPS in our office. That broke my heart and was very hard to hear. She screamed through the office. All I kept hearing was, "Please, don't take my baby. It was a newborn. She was on drugs when it was born." So when the drug test came back, she had already been discharged. If they don't suspect drugs right away, the testing is delayed. So they had to set up a sting at the office. Made us look like assholes that take babies away, and people already don't trust the WIC office. I have also had countless children hold my hand and want to stay with me. I have gotten many hugs, and they have sat on my lap. Those are the ones that break your heart. If they are showing a stranger so much affection, you know they aren't getting it at home. They are craving it. A mom came in sharing a pacifier with her baby. She would take it out to talk to me, then put it back in her own mouth. I had to ask her to remove it. She then was curious that her and her baby have these little red bumps around their mouths. Well, stop using her damn binky and I bet it goes away. Countless parents have given up their baby to the grandparents because they didn't care for that gender. One set of grandparents didn't like their grandkids because they were triplets. I have so many stories. Edit. Spelling. 3 examples, all the same set of parents. They have a 7-year-old, almost 8, by this point, who is not potty trained, not still wets the bed, or has the occasional accident when frightened or excited. Nearly every time we get together with this family, this child has dirty pants, very noticeably smelly dirty pants, and does nothing about it, even when prompted. One incident, when this kid had just turned 7, the family was at our house, and dad comes out to our living room to tell mom that kid A smells a little poopy, maybe she should do something about it. Mom replies, "Oh, I didn't bring anything. The bathroom accident might have caught her by surprise, but not us. We have noticed how often this child cheats himself, and we had everything she needed to clean him up. 2 new, unopened containers of wipes along with powder and a change of undergarments. Even after we provided the parents with this, mom needed some arm twisting to change her son. They did nothing at all to address this issue, even after they were reported to CPS by a nurse. Lack of toilet training in a child over 3 is often a sign of sexual abuse, and are only now beginning to address it, because his school will not accept him back for classes until he is trained. Part of their failure to deal with the problem is likely denial, and I understand that admitting that something may be amiss with your child is terrifying, but this feels akin to criminal negligence on their part. During a visit to the home of this family, while mom was still at work, I was left to watch the aforementioned kid A when dad decided to quickly run an errand. Kid A, aged 6 at the time, insists on standing in the road to watch for the return of mom's car and screamed when I bodily picked him up around the waist and carried him out of the road. When mom returned, he described the situation as just about any 6-year-old would. "Mommy, Thoro isn't the boss of me." Mom's reply, "You're right. Not, it doesn't matter if Thoro is the boss or not. You know you're not allowed in the road. Not Thoro or isn't mommy or daddy, but we put Thoro in charge while we were away. Nothing. Just, you're right. Thoro's not the boss." The mind reels. Kid A has been killing Japanese beetles all morning, screaming, as in actually shouting Japanese beetle, every time he spots one. When he spots one on my shoulder, he screams out his beetle war cry and physically climbs up my body to squish the bug into the cloth of my shirt. I tell him, in an authoritarian voice, "Kid A, get down. You don't climb people like trees. Come on, now." Dad pulls Kid A aside and, in a tone of wheedling condescension, says, "Thoro is a liberal environmentalist and doesn't want you to kill any bugs because Thoro wants to take the bug home and hug it and squeeze it and call it George." As though the only reason I would mind a screaming 40-pound child who reeks of sheet, again, clambering up my person would be a namby-pamby unwillingness to let said child kill a garden pest, and that this namby-pamby attitude was worthy of being ridiculed. I wouldn't have let a screaming child who was stewing in his own feces climb all over me if his intent in the end was to give me a waffle cone overflowing with my favorite flavor ice cream. Dad either did not notice or was completely unwilling to acknowledge that his son's behavior was completely unacceptable. I have seen other parents who don't keep on top of every incidence of bad behavior on the part of their children, and I'm willing to chalk some of that up to exhaustion on their part or to distraction, but this couple's long-standing pattern of what? Cluelessness? Complete lack of regard for others, such as those who have to clean up chairs and floors after a poopy child has been through. It just burns me. Heck, it's been nice to rant here, since it allows me to get my frustration out of my system, and since talking to these parents leads nowhere. Used to babysit for a very dysfunctional family. The mum got knocked up on purpose so the dad wouldn't leave her. Subsequently the dad hated the mum and resented the child. I know this because they fought about it often, publicly, and in front of the child. When I would arrive, the baby would always have a very dirty diaper that had obviously been left like that for many hours. The baby's first word was her own name, and then my name. Not mama or dada, her own freaking 3-syllable name. One day, the child had no milk or baby food left, and the mom goes to the store and comes back with just a pack of cigarettes. I asked her why she didn't get anything for the baby, and she said, well, I didn't have enough for both, and I don't get paid till Friday. It was Wednesday, and she was just gonna let the kid go hungry for 3 days. There was nothing edible in the house. I fucking lost it. I don't think I have ever raged out on somebody so bad in my entire life. I let her have it for a good 10 minutes, screaming at the top of my lungs a litany of reasons why she was a failure as a parent, and how I was gonna call CPS if things didn't change. Anyways, she burst into tears and took the cigarettes back and came home with milk, so I guess it kinda worked. I ended up making pureed veggies at home and bringing them to the little girl for the rest of the week. They moved away shortly after that, and I always wonder what happened to the little girl. Edit. I was 16 at the time. I work in social services, so highlights include the 10-year-old on probation after getting intoxicated on half a bottle of tequila, the 14-year-old whose mother told him he was the devil and she hated him because he told her he was an atheist, the dad with a 14-year-old daughter and 20-year-old live-in girlfriend, the latter who would regularly borrow the daughter's clothes at a Goodwill with boyfriend. A girl maybe 3 to 4 with an obvious mental retardation is left alone in a shopping cart while chatty mom is chatty. The girl stands up in the rocking cart, parked over concrete. Mom is still gossiping away nearby. The girl begins to teeter precariously and boyfriend runs over and dives, catching her like a football, literally a foot away from crashing her skull into the concrete. Mom turns around and proceeds to glare at boyfriend before snatching her child back and continuing her conversation. One of the worst, the 12-year-old, 400-pound girl who, in addition to the horrific nutrition, had never been taught hygiene like at all. I cannot exaggerate how much this poor child reeked, and you could honestly not be within 5 feet of her without the overpowering urge to vomit. Worse, while working with us, there was an incident where she bled on one of our seats. We asked her about having her period, and she said that she didn't have it. We asked how often this happened, and she said about once every 3 or 4 weeks. She had been having her period for a year and had no idea. Also, she defecated in my car. As I was entering a grocery store after a hard day of dealing with a megalomaniacal boss, I stopped as I noticed a child of 2 stomping merrily along far in front of his mother, looking back over his shoulder and not where he was going, like some kind of self-injury seeking missile. As I now understand toddlers to be, he makes a beeline for my shins with a full head of steam, his head turning back to face me, and recognize the obstruction in the same instant he struck me, now face first. The impact barely registers on my stationary 6-foot frame, but few face-to kneecap interactions are pleasant, and this one sends him on his diaper as the crying starts. His parent's maternal instinct rematerializes, and she swoops down to his side. I'm still somewhat in shock, not from the force of the blow, titanic as it must have seemed to the child, but from the surreal nature of the situation. It only got worse a moment later, when the mother looked up at me and demanded, "What's your problem?" Her expression conveyed that she was attempting to set me on fire with her mind, but as I'm still here typing this to you, we can safely assume that this attempt failed. The pilot light on her mental flamethrower extinguished due to lack of fuel. Snapped back to reality. My mind darted in several directions. Her child ran into me, not I into it. Her lack of parenting and oversight skills are my problem. I'm no baby hitting monster. How best to convey my righteous indignation? The following string flowed from my mouth, verbatim, remembered in detail to this day. Lady, it's been a long day, and I don't have the anger or the energy left to respond to that in a way that meets my needs at this point. So, let's just say I came up with something witty that insulted both your child's intelligence and your ability as a parent, that you got righteously indignant and stalked off, and we'll call it even. Deal. I can only assume she accepted the deal, because an indignant huff was all I got in response. Edit. I accidentally a word. Fixed. Not strangers exactly, these people were friends of some friends of mine, and I worked with them on, but we rarely, if ever, spoke. I would sometimes end up at their house for a party about once a month. They have 3 kids who were roughly 9, 7, and 2 at the time, the youngest being a girl. First off, their house was a faking disaster zone. There were German cockroaches everywhere, crawling on every single thing in that house. I was told, before going there the first time, to never leave your drink unattended, because a bug will crawl into it. There was also a nasty layer of bug poop and dirt on pretty much everything. We mostly hung out in the backyard by a bonfire. Anyway, the place was beyond dirty and looked like it hadn't been cleaned since they moved in. The kids were always incredibly dirty too. Once time I was sitting on the couch talking with some people and the 2 boys were wrestling on the floor. The older boy did some kind of WWF move and dropped the younger boy on his head. There was an audible crack that made everyone stop talking. His dad was standing right there and didn't even wince. The kid stood up and I could tell something was wrong. His eyes were all glazed. He kept saying he was sleepy, so his dad told him to just go to bed. This was at 2 AM on like a Tuesday, by the way. About a week later I saw the stepdad slap the shit out of the older boy. That same night I heard him talking to someone, on the verge of tears, complaining that his mom wouldn't let him go live with his biological father. The next time I went over there we were all crammed into a bedroom smoking trees. About 15 minutes in, I notice the little girl has been in this smoke-filled room the entire time. Not only that, but she is writhing around on the bed, half asleep and half naked, rubbing her diapered crotch. I asked someone what the fuck was up with the kid and her mom chimed in that yeah, I think she has a UT. I couldn't believe it. The kid was faking dirty, probably hadn't bathed in a week, and was scratching her crotch the entire time we were in there. I refused to go over there after that, but I doubt anything improved. I contemplated calling child services for a long time, but decided not to and still regret that decision. Edit. Okay assholes, this was 7 years ago, when I was 18. I just found the mom's Facebook, and she looks about 100x better than she did when I knew her. She used to look like a crackhead and now she actually has meat on her bones. I also can't find her husbands on her friends list, which makes me think they are divorced or something. Even if I were to call CPS, what exactly would I say? Oh, I knew these rednecks about 7 years ago, and I think they were neglecting their children, but I don't know them now, and I'm only calling you because the internet made me feel guilty. What can you do? I worked in a grocery store in a poor neighborhood for several years. Trust me, I saw bad parenting on a daily basis. I have 2 examples. Many of our customers were on welfare, obvious because they paid for food with food vouchers, equivalent of food stamps, I guess. And the type of food they would purchase would give me Raja face. Seriously, one time we have a woman trailing 3 kids, none older than 6, with a $200 food voucher. Her cart would be full of junk food, cookies, chips/crisps, carbonated sugared drinks and some instant foods like Lunchables. Now keep in mind that it's far cheaper to buy crackers, cheese, meat, etc. The components of a Lunchable, and it'll be much healthier, much less sodium, and then she'd have $100 of expensive cuts of meat. For those wondering, when you get a food voucher, you have to spend the money on food. So for those who want to buy alcohol or cigarettes, the common scam is to buy some quality meat or some bulk food, then go sell it under the table at a restaurant. Buy a $100 cut of meat, sell it for $50. With that money, they can come back and buy cigarettes, etc. It's painfully obvious to those of us working at the grocery store, particularly when they walk in a few hours later with cash, but what do? I'm sorry, but you obviously don't even know how to cook filet mignon. That's discrimination. I also worked in loss prevention. One day, we get this kid in who is maybe 10 years old. I'm watching him on the monitors and it's obvious shoplifting. He sticks something down his pants. So I head to intercept him at the door. As I stop him and ask him to hand over the stolen goods, I'm expecting chocolate bars or candy, but he pulls out a toothbrush and toothpaste. I'm speechless. I just try to imagine what kind of parenting creates a kid who goes to a store to shoplift toothpaste. How sad is that? I just took the items and said get out of here, but in retrospect, I should've done something more point, and of course I'm not even mentioning the parents who would let their kids go crazy, running around, knocking down displays. But at least I had the power to throw them out of the store if they were causing a disturbance, and I used it frequently. I spent 4 years working in childcare and can regale you with story after story of both good and extremely poor parenting. Point 1 in particular that still bothers me to this day, just because of the blatant brainwashingness of it. I'm a white female in my 20s, and many of the people who worked on staff with me were younger than me and fairly uninterested in their job duties. So after seeing a few kids get hurt because of the lack of supervision by my coworkers, I became hypervigilant about making sure my group of kids were properly monitored and rules were followed. I wasn't a serious hardus, just no pushing, fighting, stick throwing, etc. General stuff not to get the kids hurt. In a hole near the playground area was a large covered area for rainy days. The older kids would often play foursquare, dodgeball, basketball, etc. in there, because the floor was concrete and the walls were brick. There was one black kid, 4th grade, so about 9 or 10 years old, who fancied himself an acrobat. He could always be found doing cartwheels and handstands on the concrete, and I would always tell him to stop. He'd always say, "Why? I never fall. I'm too good to fall." I'd say, "Yeah, I know you're good, but even the best Olympic gymnasts fall and hurt themselves pretty bad. And they fall on pads. Imagine if you fell on this concrete, it would be a whole lot worse." He never listened and just continued to do the same thing, day in and day out. I eventually started putting him in timeout because he wouldn't stop. Every time I'd sit down with him and explain that the reason he was having to sit out was because he couldn't follow directions that were meant to keep him safe. His mother was a teacher at another school, so I assumed that she would understand. I was very wrong. One afternoon, the mom comes to pick up her kid and asks to speak with me. She wants to know why I'm picking on her son. I explained to her the routine her son and I have fallen into, him doing potentially dangerous handstands/flips on concrete, me telling him to stop, him ignoring me putting him in timeout. She says, "I don't know if there is some sort of cultural difference going on here, but you are targeting my child." I'm slightly taken aback here and I'm thinking, did she just call me a racist? I tell her, "No ma'am, I can assure you I'm not targeting your child. There are plenty of other kids that do the same thing he does, and they get the same treatment. The only difference is that they stop after being told, and time or two, your son doesn't." She hits the roof. "Oh, so you're saying my child is stupid, is that it? All you white people think black people are stupid." She's ranting, she's raving, she's screaming at me at my place of employment. I'm completely speechless. The kid, meanwhile, is just sitting back watching with this sheet-eating grin on his face. And I realize, this is such learned behavior. He knows to play the race card because he's seen his parents do it. He knows he'll eventually get what he wants if his parents raise a big enough stink about it. It made me sick. Eventually our conversation ended with me telling her that I would happily turn a blind eye to her child and happily let him break his arm because of his poor decision making, but I wouldn't, because letting him slide would set an unacceptable precedent for the other kids. I would continue to do whatever I needed to do to keep her child and every other child safe while on school property, and if she had a problem with that then she could take it up with the principal. Not really strangers, because I'm married to one of them now, but when I first started dating my wife and I went to visit her and her son at her father's house, they were just piling on the kid like you would not believe. Everything he did wrong resulted in a nuclear explosion that they saw as being corrective, but what I saw as being borderline abuse. So I sat my now wife and her father down and explained it like this. There's this movie called Office Space. My now wife got the reference immediately, one of the vast number of reasons we are married now, and I told them the story about how the guy had 7 bosses, and every time he screws up, he has to hear about it 7 times. They were both yelling at the kid every time he screwed up, which for a 13-year-old is pretty frequently. Sometimes 20 or 30 times in my presence alone. I told them they are going to drive him crazy and he's going to go Columbine on there, as if they aren't careful point. So they asked me what I would do. I told them to go to an office supply store and buy a whiteboard they can stick up by the front door. Load it up with his chores and make him check them off. When he's done point, then, instead of yelling at him 50 or 60 times a day, you just ask him if he's checked off his board point. It worked. He's going to be 15 in a few weeks and doesn't even really need the board anymore. About 3 years ago, when I was a senior in high school, a few of my friends and I were getting food after school at Chipotle. Being the only Chipotle in the area, it's always filled with people and has a long line, but it's always worth the wait. This mom, who honestly looks like she's been abusing meth for years, is in front of us with her absolutely adorable little daughter who could have been between the ages 2 to 4. The daughter had a doll and accidentally took the arm out, so she hands it to her mom to fix. All you need to do is literally stick it back in and it's as good as new. Instead, this mom takes it from her and screams, "You faking broke it again." That's the third time this week. She faking throws it in the trash and the girl breaks down in tears. The girl says, "But mommy, I can fix it. I saw how you did it last time." Then went to go retrieve it from the trash. The mom snatches her by the arm, yanks her to the floor so hard that it was obvious this little girl's arm must have become dislocated, judging by the scream coming from the girl and the actual positioning of her arm. I mean, every single faking person in that restaurant got up and went to help the girl and get the mom the fuck away from her. Like 4 people called the cops and we all waited to make sure she was carted off by the authorities. I wish I knew what happened to that girl, but I really hope that she doesn't live with that woman anymore. Abusing children breaks my heart equals backslash. A few years ago, I worked at a grocery store. I was bagging groceries for a woman using one of our wheelchairs and a large cast on her leg. She had a beautiful little girl, perhaps around 7 years old, with long blonde hair, and a little boy, perhaps 5. I turned to the little girl and told her I thought her dress was very pretty. She made this disgusted face and stuck her tongue out at me. Despite the warning signs, I offered to take her groceries out, as she obviously needed assistance. I pushed the cart in front of me, or the whole way out to the car. The girl, sitting in the cart, demanded I put her on a certain side of the car. I told her firmly, but politely, that her mom would decide where she sat. She began to throw a temper tantrum, and it was with relief that I turned away and began to unpack the mother's groceries into the car. Without warning, something hit me in the head, and I looked up to see that the little boy had climbed up on top of the car and was hitting me with a cereal box. In the background, I could hear the mom half-heartedly yelling. Determined not to let 2 brats scare me off, I finished what I was doing and politely asked if there was anything else I could do. The little boy and girl were safely buckled in the car, and so I was at least out of danger. Not even looking me in the eye, the little girl handed me trash to throw away. Seeing that this was the last straw, the mother took the trash and got in her car. The next to me they came through my line. I looked the mom in the eyes and very deliberately walked away. If she can't handle her kids, it's not my problem. I have a ton of these from different places I have worked, but this is my favorite. Point warning. It's definitely a I feel so bad for laughing story, because it is absolutely ridiculous. I worked at a very busy movie theater, and one day I was sweeping up the lobby when there was a mother and her little girl, probably about 4 or 5, in the front of the concessions line. I was sweeping near them, and the kid was doing the usual "Mommy, I want popcorn. Mommy, mommy, I want popcorn. Mommy, get popcorn" thing over and over, which is annoying, but it's a movie theater and I know that for me the experience isn't the same without concessions, with the exception of the period after working there, when I was sick of popcorn, so I understood, but I digress. So the kid continues with the begging, with the mom's agitation increasing, and when I get right in front on them, the mom snaps, turns to her kid, and says, "Shut up. Do you want mommy to just go home and kill herself? Is that what you want? A dead mommy? Because that's what will happen if you don't shut up right now, and it will be all your fault." I stopped sweeping, froze with an expression that was a mixture of shock and poker face, and ran off quickly before I could yell "What the fuck is wrong with you?" or start laughing at how sudden and insane it was. It was horrible and absurd. Who says that to their tiny child? That kid will have problems. Worked at a department store at the mall for 3 years to pay for college. Our store was one of the huge anchor stores in our city's largest mall, and right next to the food court/play area. At about 5 p.m., some employees see a group of 4 children walking around in our store. The oldest was a maybe 7-year-old girl, and the youngest was just barely 2 years old. No parents in sight. One of the friendly grandma employees approaches them and calls a security guard after learning their story. The 4 kids belong to 2 different women who came to the mall to have a girls' day shopping trip and left the kids in the play area while they shopped. It had been a while, and the 7-year-old got nervous and decided to go searching for their moms. The kids are taken upstairs to the manager's offices and given some snacks, crayons, and things to color. The 7-year-old is getting nervous and keeps asking to go back to the play area. After getting a description to mall security, they go on the hunt for moms. Police are called, etc. A mall security goon is posted at the play area with a description of the moms, waiting for them to come back. 3 hours later, the mall security dude brings the moms into the store to pick up their kids. A cop meets them there. The women are furious that we stole her kids, and I was checking in on them every 20 minutes. The cop informs them that this is impossible, as the kids have been inside our store for the last 3 hours. Much eye rolling and irritation coming from the moms. While the cop's explaining to the moms how much trouble they are in, one of the moms looks at the 7-year-old with narrowed eyes and a slow head shake, telepathically beaming, "You are getting so whooped when we get home." The cop observes this and goes into full berserker mode. This lady cop, built like a gymnast and actually quite pretty, gets up in this woman's face and screams at her, chewing her up and down. "If you lay a hand on any of these kids, I will personally come throw your ghetto ass in jail. Your children could have been abducted/raped/murdered over 3 hours ago, and you'd just now be finding out they are missing. I'm writing you a citation, and Child Protection Services and state social workers will be making surprise visits to your home frequently. If anything is out of order with these children, you will lose custody and probably go to prison. Do you understand me?" The wide-eyed ghetto moms, having been sufficiently humbled, get their paper arrest and shuffle out with their armfuls of shopping bags and kids to their respective vehicles. TLDR: 2 ghetto moms abandon children in mall play place. SAS cop, get slapped with long arm of law. This is probably going to get buried, but my boyfriend and I were waiting to eat at a restaurant that is always busy. No matter what day of the week you come, you always wait at least an hour and a half to eat. We were sitting on the bench by the door and we see a white family of 4 walk up. The dad is just talking on his phone and the mom is looking harried and yelling at her 2 kids to quit messing around. The boy was probably around 9 and the little girl was 6ish. The mother is also clearly pregnant with her 3rd. So my boyfriend and I get up and offer the bench to this family, and the mother sits down with her 2 children and starts glaring at me. After giving me the stink eye for a good 10 minutes and me desperately trying to ignore her, I calmly ask her if there is a problem. She then proceeds to call me a hoe and tells me that I won't be able to flaunt my body soon enough. I was wearing jeans and a white v-neck, since I will get knocked up and dumped, and she hopes my Asian horrors will learn my lesson. I'm standing there flabbergasted and speechless as I have done absolutely nothing to invoke this lady's anger. Her kids are sitting next to her on the bench watching gleefully as their mother yells at me. After she finished, the little boy looks at me and points and says, "Ho, you're a hoe," while his mother is patting his head and telling him good job. The little girl is just citing their laughing. Game over. My boyfriend loses his sheet, walks over to the dad, rips the phone out of his hand, throws it to the floor and steps on it. He then told the dad to take the kids and discipline them and teach them their manners. The dad takes both kids away to talk to them, and I turn to the pregnant mother and beat the sheet out of her. I basically told her that she was unfit to be a mother. I also said that I feel especially horrible for the unborn baby because it had the misfortune to be born into such a shitstorm of hate. The manager of the restaurant comes out and asks the family to leave. A patron waiting outside had gone in and told them the situation and tells the family they have a right to refuse service. The lady starts laying into him, and the little boy comes up and kicks the manager in the shin point. At that point I pulled out my phone and called the cops. The family then decided to cut their losses and leave, but good God, if that woman hadn't been pregnant I would have straight up beat the shit out of her unfit parenting. I fear for the future generations. When we were 8 and 6, my brothers, my twin and our little bro, and we were dropped to our maternal grandparents' house by our other grandfather, just to find it empty and locked with nobody inside. The maid who was leaving told my grandfather that they were at the beach with friend not foreign, that she was going to tell them we had arrived. We knew they were probably out to see friends with our aunts and cousins. So we said this is okay to our grandfather, there at the beach, we are going to them. The house is built at 10 meters from the beach. So he left, and we went wandering to find them. When we arrived to the said friend's house, my grandparents were utterly pissed off and starts yelling at us. They said we were mad and stupid to having gone alone on a trip to find them. The house was empty, we answered. They replied that we should have had stay at the house waiting for them. 3 young kids locked outside of the house in the middle of summer. So they decided to send us back to our parents. And in front of our aunts and cousins, whom didn't said a fuck, they exclude us from the rest of the family, packed our things without allowing us to change. We were in bathing suit with just a shirt, leave us outside of the house until dark, around 11 PM in summer, and then made us sleep on the couch, plus we had to stay without food apart from a cereal bowl the next morning for 24 hours until we arrived back to our parents. They forwarded our cousins to talk to us and said we had bad influence on our cousins. They knew all the time that we were coming and choose not to wait for us. True enough, we were agitated kids, but what the fuck point, things have calmed down since then, but I can't understand what the fuck crossed their minds into thinking this was the right answer to our doings. I worked at an adult store for almost 3 years. It wasn't a skeevy scary place with blacked out windows and a back room, but it was still an adult store. No one under 18 was allowed in. End of story. If you came in with a kid, I told you to leave. One day, a woman came in with her 5-year-old child in tow. He can't come in here, I said. Why not? She asked, all angry like. I was thinking, look, if I have to explain to you why this is not an appropriate venue for children, you've already failed at life. I didn't say that. I just told her kids weren't allowed. Anyway, she starts swearing and being pissy and leaves. She comes back in with no kid, maybe 10 minutes later. I don't say anything and assume she has left the kid in the car with someone else. This was actually very common. You would look outside and see someone in a car with a handful of kids. The person in the store would finish shopping and the other person who was watching the kids in the car would come in. She stays in the store for about half an hour, being trashy the whole time. It was summertime and nearly 100 degrees outside. My coworker goes outside to throw something in the dumpster and comes in angry, asking the woman to leave immediately. A fight nearly ensued. The woman had left her kid in a car, not running /no axe windows up except for a small crack. The woman threw items around the store and stormed out. Oh, my coworker got the woman's car description and tag. We called the local police afterward. I also saw lots and lots of strippers with their mothers. These weren't nice looking strippers who worked at legit clubs either, but cracked out, badly tattooed missing teeth strippers with scars from stabbings and gunshot wounds who worked at a scary club down the road from the store, known for being a drug and prostitution den. One day, a mother-daughter team came in. The mother was probably 350 pounds and using an electric wheelchair and missing many teeth. The daughter was tall and painfully thin and covered in cheaty tattoos. They came in looking for outfits for the daughter and the mother started complaining loudly about our prices and the quality of the clothes. Then, the mother starts yelling at the daughter, who honestly could not have been more than 19 years old, about how she was fat and ugly and needed to work more to make more money because her disability money just wasn't covering it, and that she needed to go on more dates. The mother tried to buy a $20 outfit with a credit card that was declined, and she started yelling at me and the daughter about that too. I felt like it was some weird mother as her daughter's pimp situation. The relationship between education and income and parenting is, sadly, very strong. When I worked as a cashier, I used to guess who would pay with food stamps, based on how they treated their children. Although I did see low-income families who were good with their kids, smacking/screaming at children was a stronger indicator of poverty than almost anything else I saw. The saddest incident for me was when I was working at a super Walmart. A girl around 9 approached me to say she couldn't find her parents. She was the sweetest little girl. She'd been taught in school what to do when lost. We paged the parents and there was no response after 3 pages and 30 minutes. The girl had their cell phone. They actually answered and said they weren't coming to get her to teach her a lesson. We called the police and eventually located the parents in the large store. They still refused to come to the front to get the kid until the police threatened to charge them with child abandonment. By this time, nearly 2 hours had passed. The whole time the girl was quiet and well behaved. When they finally came up, they proceeded to scream at the kid for getting lost. The police officer kept trying to tell the kid she did good, did all the right things. As the parents walked away, the woman turned to me and said, "Do you want a free kid? She's such a pain in the ass. I wish I could just get rid of her." I was just so shocked I didn't know what to say. TLDR. Parents don't want their kids. So sad. I posted this somewhere else before, and it got buried, and it's going to get buried here too. But fuck it, I like this story. I was working at Best Buy, and a huge car show was coming to town. So at times the car audio department would get pretty busy. This died down about a week before the show, and I was happy. These people were not the nicest people to have ask you questions about subwoofers and amps. The day before the car show, this black guy comes in with his white wife and their 3 little kids. The mom disappeared with one of the kids and left him with the other 2 in the car audio department. I wander over and immediately this guy wants to be my best friend. Starts talking about his car and how he is going to win best in show and blah blah blah. He was actually a nice guy, but was eating up all my time and I needed to attend to other people in my other departments. During this he completely ignores his kids. They are all over the place doing whatever it was that pleased them. Anyway, he gets what he needs and starts herd his children towards the checkout lanes. The smaller kid, maybe 3 or 4 years old, decides that he is going to climb our stairs and try to make a break for the video games. His dad runs over, picks him up by his foot and carries him down the stairs upside down, all while making comments to other people in the store. He passes me and says loudly, "This one's faster than an Edgar running from the police." I was the manager of a shoe store and had many lovely parents come into the store. My favorite was a lady with her 2 little boys. One looked to be maybe 4 and the other maybe 7. I discovered the trail to the little boys as one had a juice container that had dripped red juice throughout the store. Once I made it to the boys, they were in the very back of the store on a ramp we had to bring in the deliveries. They were trying to do backflips off the railings. I told them they had to get down and that it was unsafe and they weren't allowed on it. So they got down and went back to their mom, whom I informed of the indecent and asked her please make sure they didn't do that again. Not surprising, the smallest child had a big strip of stitches across the top of his head. It was obvious he had already busted his head open from doing something stupid. She didn't even look up from the shoes she was trying on and gave a half-hearted admonishment to listen to the lady. 5 minutes later they were back up there. I once again asked them to get down and then told their mother, who had moved closer to them but still wasn't paying attention to them, that if the boys got on the railing one more time I would have to ask her to leave the store. She got very upset and then started yelling at the boys to stop. I could only shake my head. She really seriously could have cared less about those kids, obvious by her lack of concern over her child, who had just had a head injury, until it was going to directly affect her shopping. Bad parenting, you say? Well, allow me to floor you with the tale of a small hellion. I went in for my usual 4:10:30 shift as a cashier at Walmart. Shortly into my shift I had just finished checking out a customer member, if you're a Sam's Club goon, when I noticed a lady looking for an open checkout. She looked in my direction and I motioned for her to come down to my register. She gets closer to the register and noticed she has a boy in the cart. We'll say he was 6. Once Sushi arrived at the checkout, it must have registered with the kid that they were about to be leaving the store. Cute tantrum point kid proceeds to inhale a volume of air that would make Kirby blush and yells so loud all the other cashiers and customers near the checkouts and surrounding departments, jewelry etc. stop what they're doing to look. You seriously would have thought he had just been impaled. This yell lasts for a few seconds, then his face became very red and he launches into a tirade. He yells at his mom repeatedly, "I wanted it. I want one. I wanted it. And you didn't get it." After screaming this 4 or 5 times, the mother is trying everything she can to silence him. She offers him candy, oh my god, and tries other ways of bribing him, but nothing works. Apparently he was even more frustrated by her overly nice and wrong attempts to give him something he didn't want that he started yelling, "I want a fishing pole beach." He said this multiple times as well. She finally ended up taking all her items off the belt, putting them in the cart, walked back to sporting goods, and returned to my register, of all people, with a fishing pole for this little bastard. I can only hope he was lynched with it once they got home. I've seen plenty of awful parenting, but can share a story of my own. My son is 7, has Asperger's syndrome, very clever boy but struggles socially. Last year I managed to convince him to play soccer on Saturday mornings. We live in an area with regular below 0 Celsius temperatures, so would trot off to soccer in the freezing cold, drive 50 to 60 km to get there, hang out with the awful soccer mums. What a bunch of miserable creatures. Stay-at-home mums with the most insipid interests and the stupidest laughs, while the kids ran around aimlessly playing soccer, eat a nasty old sausage on bread and go home. I work 50+ hours per week with people with mental illness or disability, so I wasn't super keen, but you know, I'm a parent. I'll slap on a smiley face and an enthusiastic attitude and do it for his sake. Husband works 7 days, so makes it to 5 minutes of one game. Kids team comes about last. He gets a plastic trophy. Boots go in the back of the cupboard. Mother of the year this year. Soccer registrations roll around, and I say to my son, "Mate, do you want to play soccer again this year?" Trying to encourage team sports and social connection and all that. He looks at me and says, "No, we'll stay home this year. You hated all the other mums because they were boggans. You never brought the oranges when it was our turn, and you always had a hangover from being so drunk the night before." Yep, mother of the year, alright. At a local Goodwill, which, if you didn't know, are great places to find cheap as sheet books, a dumpy, aged, withered old troll of a mom is fussing with a cart. The child seat area of the cart contains 2 ultra mega gulp soda cups. Their position is precarious. Her child is a chubby, one-day obese, little girl of about 9 or so. She is standing in the doorway, holding the door open, not for the benefit of others, but because she wants to leave. I thank her for holding the door, and she sticks her tongue out at me. It's Blue. An older black man exits the store and likewise offers thanks to the little girl. She retaliates in her blue-tongued fashion. Feigning outrage, the man jovially accosts her with some kind of long, feathered keychain. The child shrieks and shuffles about the store, her attacker in pursuit. As this is happening, the troll mother accidentally dumps both of her ultra mega diabetes jugs all over the floor. Sugar sludge goes everywhere. The black man gives up the fight and leaves with a chuckle. The fat child trundles up to mom and begins to shout, "I hate that man. I want to go home forever." Over and over again. "I want to go home forever." The hag grabs her bags in silence, takes the girl by the hand, and goes out to a half-crumpled minivan in the parking lot. She loads everything up, gets in, and drives away. Her negligence festers on the floor. She didn't even bother to inform the employees. I was at a McDonald's in a shittier area of town. On the one day my dad lent me his '68 Mustang Fastback. I'm in the McDonald's when a kid 5 years old is walking up and down the tables asking for money to buy apple slices. After we're done, we see the kid running around cars and runs really close to my dad's car. Then this kid's dad, who must be close to 60 years old, tells him to stop running near the cars. The kid doesn't, so the dad grabs him by one arm and literally throws him at the bumper of the nearest car, Gia Metro or something. I'm already in the Mustang at this point, and I lean out the window and tell him I'm calling the cops. Worst part, I tell the police there's a kid being beaten, and they say there's nothing they can do. Call Child and Family Services. I call them, and they say call police non-emergency. I call police non-emergency, and they say it's for CFS. I guess a kid getting the sheet beaten out of him isn't an emergency anymore. Luckily a crowd of middle-aged guys leaving the McDonald's forced the guy to stop, but on my own I couldn't have done anything to this man. He was a grizzly of a man, and I'm 6 feet 0, 140 pounds. He could have quite literally killed me if I got out of the car. Ever since then I have stopped trusting the police to protect us. They are here to write tickets and nothing more, and they made that very clear that day. I used to work at a toy store and a lot of parents associated us with free childcare. For some reason, we often had to call security about unattended kids whose parents had ditched them while they went shopping. Back when we had a giant mountain of plush toys, parents would plop their kids on it for photos. Cute, except that some jackers would use the mountain for garbage disposal. Empty cups, food wrappers, dirty diapers, you name it. Parents would get pissy when you asked them not to put their kid there, but we couldn't really tell them why they shouldn't. That wasn't the worst case, though. At one point we had this Tinkerbell tea set that came with a big teapot. One day I saw a toddler, 3 years old at most, knock one of the pots down. Of course it shattered into a million pointy pieces. The girl's father was standing within arm's reach at the time and made no effort to stop her. That was infuriating enough. But then this douche stands there, watching, as his daughter crouches and reaches for the biggest, most jagged shard of glass. I had to make a dive for the girl and grab her before she could cut her little hand open. I was worried the dad would flip out on me for touching the kid, but he didn't seem fussed about that at all. If anything, he looked disappointed. I can only assume he was hoping the girl would cut herself so he could sue the store. Oh hey, I have one. Multiple, actually. So, these all take place in the town I grew up in. Same place, same people, all in a span of about 3 or 4 years. My neighbors had this daughter, roughly the age of 10. Not mature 10, might I add. So my sister, whom is the same age, or around the same age, is playing with her dolls in the backyard, or something. Then the neighbor girl goes and asks my sister if she can play. I think. Then the neighbor girl proceeds to push her and yank her toys away. My sister starts crying, but, politely, rejects her request to play toys and takes her Barbies inside. The neighbor gets super fucking pissed. Like really pissed. Just wait, I'm not done yet. So, I'm pretty sure this is what happened. Little neighbor girl runs and tells her mom, completely stretching the truth, telling her mom that she had asked my sister to play and that my sister had punched her in the face, pushed her down, and kicked dirt in her eyes while grabbing her dolls and taking them inside. The mom gets faking pissed too. Now sheepdog, this is where it gets interesting. The mom comes over to my house, bangs on the door, almost breaking it, faking screams at my mom. My little girl came over to ask your daughter to play, and your faking kid fucking beat the shit out of my kid, blah blah blah. Then, okay, are you ready for this? She threatens to shoot not only my sister, but me too. Cool. So my mom calls the cops. The cops come over, and my mom and the neighbor tell the cops what happened. The cops go, well, my mom, you should be more neighborly. That ends that, I guess? No. Not exactly. The little girl is still faking pissed. What does she do? Well, she does what every normal little girl does, kill our rabbit and light our backyard on fire. This other time, my sister and these other 2 neighbor girls are having a sleepover in a tent in the backyard. She doesn't invite beach face mentioned earlier because she is, well, a beach. So, being the good mother that my neighbor is, she asks her boyfriend to scare the shit out of us. It'll be funny, she says. Nice lady. Fast forward to 11 or so that night. My sister and all her little friends are sleeping. Then the neighbor's boyfriend grabs a knife and in the middle of the night stabs a hole in the tent, like in a horror movie. Then he says something like, I'm going to kill you. I'm a murderer. etc. Shit a little girl would buy. So my sister and her friends run inside, screaming. The neighbor's boyfriend starts banging on the door with the handle of the knife. My sister and her friends are faking sobbing at this point. So, my mom asks them what's wrong, and they point at the door. So the boyfriend tries to act cool or something. My mom goes to ask him what the hell is dealies, but he runs away. So my mom goes over to the neighbors to ask her what the hell her deal is. She just goes, "You just have a bad sense of humor. Maybe you'll think twice before not inviting my daughter to your sleepovers." Okay, I'm done now. I live in a pretty nice gated apartment complex, but my husband always jokes that the gates are there to keep the crazy people in, not the other way around. I'm starting to believe him. So many stories the other day, I'm inside and I hear a woman yelling at her kids at the top of her lungs. Same middle-aged, peroxide-haired, chain-smoking woman I saw coming down the stairs the other day in stripper shoes yelling into her phone. I can be as white trash as I want. I don't give a fuck what anyone says about me. I'll sleep with whoever I want. I don't care if I'm white trash. So, she's outside, leathered skin on display in the same heels, short skirt, and tiny shirt, yelling at 5 or 6 different colored kids running around, all under the age of 8, one infant, jit, in the house. Okay, in 45 minutes, y'all better jit in the house. I'm going to jail, and I don't know when I'm gonna get me bailed out, so y'all need to take care of yourself till I come home. Now jit. Then, she just drives away. I looked into the parking lot and saw about 5 people looking at the scene. All were just informed that there are now a bunch of children alone in this apartment building for who knows how long. Made me sick. I kept an eye on them until someone they all knew, and whom I've seen them on with, came home a few hours later. At college I was studying with intention of going to uni to study to be a primary school teacher. Never happened, but during that time I had both my cousin, male, 10 years older than me, and a friend of the family, female, 10 years older, both come to me and ask me to tutor their kids as they were doing pretty badly in math. He had a boy, she had a girl. The kids were both the popular types, not the most academic, but both really great kids. I think they were both about 11 over 12 at the time. I'd go round once a week, do my usual skit where I'd go round with a bit of a lesson plan, trying to show them different ways to do basic functions. Both of their parents showing interest to start with. I leave the kids bits of homework to do in the evenings and tell the parents that they really needed to work with them on point. Each time I went round I knew neither of the kids had done anything because neither parent could be ASD spending a couple of hours teaching their kids. They must have thought I was a faking miracle worker and that the 2 hours extra I spent with their kids was going to make them intellectual superiors or something. As the weeks passed you could see that both parents were getting increasingly frustrated as they hovered around and could see their kids still weren't grasping some basic math. After a while it was them raising their voices, telling their kids to try harder, and giving them such support as "come on, it's not even hard." It got increasingly frustrating the amount the friend of the family would chip in, and pretty soon that got cancelled. My cousin was the worst though. He has a pretty explosive temper, absolutely great guy, not a bad dad or bad husband or anything like that, but sometimes the little things just set him off. One Saturday I'm teaching his son who just can't get to grips with division, and suddenly he throws the books off the table and flips a switch, starts screaming at the kid, "Why can't you do it? Why can't you do it? Why is it so faking hard?" The kid was literally shaking in his seat. I, as a guy, actually got upset by it, jumped up and pushed my cousin away, and started yelling at him, calling him every name under the sun, and told him I wouldn't tutor his kid when he cares more about the problem than actually helping solve it. Bad times. TLDR. Cousin went on meltdown when his kid couldn't understand division. Unfortunately my neighbors fall into this category. Some of them are generally nice people, but the grandmother and her offspring tend to be crazy, childish, and abusive. The generation in mind are in their 30s or early 40s. They take their kids to grandma's and pretty much leave them there. They constantly slap around their own and each other's kids for misbehaving, often mild infractions. They would punish the kids frequently by making them go to their room and read X pages from a book. One of the children, the youngest of the group, was recently taken to Missouri so the mother could legally force him to go to a Christian boarding school/rehab program. If she'd done it in CA and he resisted, it would have been kidnapping. Turns out that by 14 he was on meth and using every day before school. This child had discipline problems since he was very young. He was moved to every school in the district as soon as a teacher or frequently the principal started disciplining him. the parents would automatically side with the kid, then pull him out of that school and transfer him. They would punish him severely, of course, and by the end of it, he was spending most of his time locked in his room with nothing but a bed. The parents blamed everyone else and still refused to acknowledge their role in his decline or to fully acknowledge his decline. Within the first month at the rehab program, he broke his leg. Our suspicion is that it wasn't accidental and the program had something to do with it. The parents and grandparents still say he's a good kid and that it isn't his fault, which in part is true. TL/DR. Incompetent parents, aunts, and uncles, and grandparents lead to my neighbor using meth by 14. I worked at a warming house for 2 years. For those unfamiliar, it's a heated hut next to outdoor hockey rinks to keep people from -30-degree weather while putting on skates and whatnot. I live in Minnesota, kinda the norm to be out when you shouldn't be. I was the warming house attendant, i.e. I got paid to do my homework and make sure no one died. Point being, in the heartland of hockey, a lot of retired NHL players and hockey dads would be out with their 1 to 3-year-old sons teaching them how to skate. You have to start skating before walking and meant to stay competitive. Crazy, I know. Anyways, I was working one night and it was around -10 actual with -30 wind chill and there was a pee-wee team practicing. Due to the cold they cut practice short, but there was one kid and his dad that stayed to play more. I remember the kid's tears freezing onto his face and his dad yelling at him to suck it up and get back outside. The kid kinda fell down on purpose to display he didn't want to go back out into the cold, so his dad picked him up, walked outside, then threw him in a snowbank. I watched through the windows the dad prodding his son around the ice, teaching him to skate backwards with a stick. Lots of crying, even more yelling. This kid was maybe 4 years old, and he was out in beyond frostbite weather. I understand that you want your kid to be good at sports, but this is ridiculous. The only reason they stopped skating was because I had to shut the lights off to close down. I had a garage sale with some friends and family last weekend. I've got a bunch of stuff out in my section: video games, toys, movies, etc. And my friend told me that I should really keep an eye out because she's had problems with people just walking away or pocketing stuff. So we get a bunch of nice people, but there are always the vans full of families that will walk around, ask how much something is, and then, no matter how cheap the price is, will offer like 1/10 the price, which got old and annoying fast. So this one family shows up, and they've got 2 kids that are probably 6 to 7, and they're looking at my table. The kids grab a couple of the toys, some are still in the packaging, to show their parents, which is totally fine. Once the kids show their mom and dad what they have, the parents swipe their hands to the kids, as if giving them a signal, and they start walking to the car. I see the girl and boy holding the toys away from me under their arms and against their chest as they are walking back to their van. So I have to yell, "Excuse me, but your kids didn't pay for those." I had to yell it a couple times, and when the mom finally acknowledged me, she acted like she barely understood English. I pointed to the toys the kids had and repeated myself again, and she said, "Oh, how much for each?" I said, $1. She just threw them on the edge of the walkway where we were selling clothes, and they got in their van and drove off. Regardless of what it was they were trying to steal, it not only pissed me off that they were walking away with it, but that they are teaching their extremely young kids to get away with stupid shit like this. I thought my friend was being paranoid or stereotyping people, but shit like this just reinforces people's perceptions. Especially since I saw the same thing happen multiple times in a span of 3 hours. That one was just the most blatant and upsetting. One more, he completely forgot this one. I went with my boss and a coworker to the opening of the Watchmen. Right in front of us were a mom and dad and their 2 kids, which couldn't have been more than 5 to 7 years old. I don't care how liberal of a parent you think you are, but The Watchmen is not Spider-Man. 2/3 of the movie the kids either had their heads covered by the parents' jackets or were crying because of some horrendously violent or sexual scene, not to mention bloobiness all over the place. It completely ruined my experience of the movie, and at the end my boss went up to the guy to berate him for bringing his kids to such an adult movie. My husband, then fiance, and I were at the theater to see Kick-Ass. It was later on a Monday night and the theater was perhaps 25% full. A family to our right, same row, was a couple that looked to be early 30s and their 6-year-old boy. About 10 minutes from the end of the movie the film strip jumped and we are now watching the top 4 inches of the movie at the bottom of the screen. Below everyone's feet and the back frame border. There is some mild complaining and then someone goes out to report the problem, which was eventually fixed. The mother ranted and swore the entire rest of the movie. When the lights came up she upended her bag of Skittles into the seats in front of her and the father took the lid off his pop and poured it on the floor splashing my feet. The mom then turns to the son, that's to show them for FHKING up our movie. The kid made no reply that I heard and I just sat there dumbfounded. It's not the cleaning crew's fault that the projector hiccuped. What terrible manners to teach your child who you brought to a rated R movie, past any decent bedtime, on a school night, and pumped full of MTNU. I bet you're the kind of parent who insists that your child has ADHD and go on medication. Newsflash, he's hyper and irritable because of sugar highs and withdrawals. He's undisciplined and rude because you provide no structure and set a bad example. Edit. I don't know this child, but I've known many parents like them, and they usually birth darling kids and then slowly corrupt them. Ugh. Reliving this story always reminds me how very doomed we are and why I left education. I love the children, hate the parents. Was at a theme park waiting in line for one of the roller coasters. We had already waited for something like 45 minutes and were next in line to get on. There were 3 people in my group, and since the coaster was designed so 2 people sat in a row, I was waiting by myself behind the other 2 people in my group. I heard someone waiting behind me say, "Hey, I think there's a spot right there, next to me." So I turn around, and a woman is ushering a young boy over to me. She looks at me, shrugs, and says we don't know where his parents are. So this 6-year-old kid had been waiting in line with them for 45 minutes to ride the coaster alone. I was like whatever and chatted the kid up while we waited. He was completely nonchalant about having no parents and being about to ride a crazy roller coaster alone. After screaming my head off on the coaster for 2 minutes while the kid sat nonplussed, we got off and I said, "So how are we gonna find your parents?" We walked down the exit and a man and another child were standing there and said to the kid, "Hey man, how's it going?" And that's where we parted ways. I was shocked that this kid's father had lost his 6-year-old for 45 to 60 minutes and that was his reaction. And I couldn't stop thinking about it for the entire day. Some parents TLDR, 6-year-old waits in line to ride roller coaster for an hour without parents who don't care when they finally reunite with him. My mother is a home daycare nurse sort of thing, so the first 19 to 20 years of my life, there's been more about 60 or more 1-3-year-olds in and out of my home. There was a lot of bad parenting, and maybe half of the parents perpetuated baby talk long after the kids started talking coherently. My mother has never talked down to any of the kids like that, and sometimes it was really sad to see the kids almost having a conversation that would turn into a goo goo gaga 2 minutes after a parent showed up. On the whole, that just amazed me in the worst way possible. The worst single instance was when I was 19, working part-time and would spend a lot of time helping my mother with the kids. This one mum would always be the first to drop her child off and always the last to come pick him up. Why early? So that if the kid was hungry, she didn't have to feed him at home. And, worst of all, if he shit his diaper during the night, my mum had to change the kid instead. Why was she always late? In her own words, then most days we don't have to change his diaper before he goes to bed. And that is exactly what it sounds like. This little boy would often, like once a week, be dropped off at my mum's with a sheety diaper that had been sheety for maybe 10 hours or more sometimes. I mostly didn't help out with the diaper changes, but that kid's was disturbing. It was basically one huge patch of rash, and it was clearly that he was hurting when he sat on the floor or something. Poor kid. After a month or so my mother reported it to her bosses, and it took them almost half a year of red tape before the custody of the child was given to the father instead. Back when I used to work as a manager in clothing retail, a customer came in with a little boy, probably about 4 years old. The mother appeared to be annoyed with having to drag him around with her, but I thought she was maybe just tired, or that he had been acting up, and making her day difficult. They went in a fitting room, so that she could try some things on, and after she was finished, she came out, and told the associate working the rooms, here's the clothes I don't want. Also, my son peed on the floor, and walked away. The associate called me back, and when I got there I saw that the kid had apparently stood in the corner and just straight up peed on the floor, as there was a big puddle of it sitting there. After looking around to see where the woman was, I noticed from afar that the kid's pants were all soaked in the front too, meaning he had severely wet himself. At this point I'm thinking, okay, this woman is annoyed and inconsiderate for not even bothering to offer to clean it up, and I walk back up front toward the registers to get some paper towels. The woman was checking out, and the little boy was standing next to her tugging on her shirt saying, "Mommy, mommy." Finally she looks down at him and says, "Stop it, you're making mommy want to drink." We all stare dumbfounded as she turns back to the cashier and warns her, "Don't ever have kids, they're terrible." She then signs her receipt, packs up her stuff and starts walking out. She gets to the door and calls back to her dejected, trailing son with, "Come on, now we have to buy you new clothes." The poor kid trudges slowly towards the door while chewing on his sleeve, pausing partway to look back at another associate and glare, growling, "I hate you," before turning back toward the door and shuffling off. It still makes me angry thinking about this interaction, and it fills me with sadness and regret that I didn't say something to them at the time. That kid is going to have all sorts of emotional problems thanks to the worthless woman unfit to be a mother. As a new father, I can't even imagine what compels people to talk to any child that way, much less their own. People are unbelievable as holes. TLDR. Terrible mother tells her young son that having wet himself makes her want to drink, and that she hates kids. I feel bad for the kid and guilty for not doing anything about it. Now this is second-hand information I have here. Basically there is one guy I know who is, to say the least, a dick. There are actually a lot in the area, but we are focusing on this guy who I will call Bob. Bob rapped a young girl. He was not an adult yet at the time, but that doesn't really justify anything. I'm just saying that their ages weren't too far apart. Bob apparently went to prison for a while, possibly released on bail from what I have heard. Anyways, fast forwarding a bit, Bob had a child with this girl. I was shocked when I heard the whole rap issue. The girl got an abortion. At the time she was too young for a kid, still seems too young now. Despite the odds, Bob and the girl actually got together on and off for a while, up to the point where they had a kid. Now Bob wants to be a good father. He wasn't good at anything else before, so he thinks he will have a go at being a good father. Bob gets a job to pay for the stuff for the baby, because the baby needs quite a few things. Bob ends up getting fired from his job eventually, but at least he managed to save up quite a good bit of money for the baby. He spent that money on a remote control car for himself, £700 supposedly. The car broke. Last I heard, the girl isn't letting Bob see the baby. OOHH. I got one that I've been wanting to vent for a while. A year ago or so, I'm fishing with my stepsons. We find ourselves a nice sandy beach area to cast off from and kick back to enjoy the day. Suddenly, out of faking nowhere, these two little ill-behaved cheat stints, probably about 5 and 7 years old, show up and start chasing, grabbing, and generally bothering the ever-loving shit out of these ducks that me and mine were peacefully sharing this tiny patch of sand with. Some guy shows up and stands around uselessly while his kids are being little factards. I give him a few looks and he does nothing. Finally, not wanting to cause a confrontation, me and my kids start to reel in our hooks and go find somewhere less populated by morons. As I'm reeling in my line, in full view of dipshit dad, one of the little fuck faces comes and grabs my faking fishing line as I'm reeling in. I say, "Dude, what are you doing? Let go of that. It's not yours." At this point dad decides to acknowledge that he indeed is the father of these little delinquents and promptly says, Hey man. I'll control my own kids, alright." I flip the fuck out at this point. "Well, faking, do it then. Get your faking kid off my pole." before he ends up accidentally getting a hook in his hand. Motherfucker. Dad of the year puffed up his chest a little, but I stood a good 6 inches taller than him and let him know if he didn't take his spawn off my faking beach and away from my well-behaved children, I was gonna put him in the lake and see if I could catch a 150 lbs dumb as he left. But I was so pissed we went home early. Fuck.